Who saved you? The little girl asked, staring at the bandage wrapped around Ayana's hand. The question hit harder than the hot plate she was carrying. Ayana froze for a split second between booths at Lakeside Diner in Cleveland, the smell of fries and coffee swirling around her. Her right hand, the one she always kept in a light beige bandage glove, gripped the tray so tight her knuckles ached under the cloth. The girl sat in the corner booth with her mom, a half-eaten grilled cheese on her plate, brown curls pulled into pigtails that bounced when she talked. She pointed straight at Ayana's covered hand with a child's blunt honesty. Who saved you? She repeated. Did a superhero do it? Ayana pulled the tray in close to her body, hiding the bandaged hand behind the tall milkshake glass. Just somebody from the hospital, baby, she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her voice came out softer than usual. Don't you worry about this. Your fry's okay. Her left hand, the good one, reached for the ketchup bottle, anything to change the subject. Her right hand burned under the wrap. Not from pain, but from the heat of old memories. The girl's mom, a white woman in a wrinkled work blouse, gave an embarrassed laugh. Ellie, honey, don't point, she said quickly. I'm so sorry. She's curious about everything. It's all right, Ayana lied. Kids asked honest questions. It was grown folks. Look, she hated the quick glances at her hand, the way some people's mouths tightened like scars were something dirty. She set the milkshake down in front of Ellie with her left hand. Careful, steady. Here you go. Extra sprinkles like you asked. Ellie's eyes stayed on the bandage. It looks like my daddy's hand after the fire, she said in that clear, too loud kid way. He said the fire was bad, but the lady who pulled me out was worse, burned. Did you get burned too? Ayana's heart skipped. For a second, the diner noise fell away, and she heard other sounds instead. Screams, crackling wood, her own voice shouting through smoke. Her grip slipped, and a spoon clattered onto the table. Behind her, she could feel eyes from other booths turning their way. At the counter, her boss, Rick, watched with a tight mouth, towel in his hand. I just had an accident, that's all, she said quickly, bending to pick up the spoon with her left hand. Her right stayed pressed tight against her apron. Eat your lunch before it gets cold, okay? Without waiting for an answer, she turned and hurried toward the kitchen, her chest tight, the question ringing in her head. Who saved you? In the kitchen, the air was hotter and greasier, but it felt safer with the wall between her and the curious eyes. Ayana set the tray down and leaned against the stainless steel counter for half a second, drawing a slow breath. Steam rose from the grill where Manny flipped burgers with his usual easy rhythm. Music humming from his phone in his apron pocket. You good? Nay, he asked, glancing up, his dark eyes catching the way her shoulders shook. Yeah, she said, the word automatic. Just got asked about my hand again. Manny's jaw tightened. Kid, yeah. She gave a humorless little laugh. At least kids say it out loud. Grown folks just stare like it's gonna jump off and bite them. Her eyes flicked down to the beige wrap that went from her fingers almost to her elbow. Soft but thick enough to hide the twisted shiny skin underneath. Even after a year, she still woke some mornings, surprised to see it there. The kitchen door swung open with a hard slap. Rick stepped in, wiping his hands on a towel more than they needed. Ayana, he said, voice clipped. Can I see you for a minute? His gaze dropped to her hand. It always did. She straightened, heart knocking faster. I'll be right out to check on 5 and 6, she said, just waiting on Manny for their burgers. This won't take long, Rick said, already heading toward the small office by the walk-in fridge. He didn't look back to see if she followed. In the cramped office, he shut the door halfway. Not enough for privacy, but enough to make the space feel smaller. A pile of invoices sat on the desk, and a faded poster about workplace safety peeled at the edges on the wall. Rick leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. We've talked about this hand thing, he began. Ayana's stomach dropped. I keep it wrapped, like you asked, she said quickly. It's clean. I change the bandage every day. Doctor said it's fine for food service as long as it's covered. It's not about health, Rick snapped. It's about presentation. He made a vague, annoyed wave toward the dining room. Customers don't want to see bandages and scars when they're eating. That little girl out there just asked you a question loud enough for half the place to hear. Her mom looks uncomfortable. People come here for comfort food, not reminders of trauma. He lowered his voice on the last word, like it tasted bad. Ayanna clenched her jaw. The word trauma didn't begin to cover what had happened, but hearing it used like an ugly decoration stung. What do you want me to do, Rick? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. I can't grow a new hand. Gloves, he said. Those thin black ones. Wear one on both hands so it looks like style, not injury. Or work more in the back, where folks can't see you as much. Until you know. He trailed off, eyes sliding away, like he couldn't bring himself to say until it looks better out loud. We can't risk bad reviews because of that. For a moment, anger flared hot under her skin, almost hotter than the fire had felt. That, she repeated, looking down at the wrapped hand that had carried a screaming toddler through smoke. That had broken a window when the door was blocked. That is the only reason some people are alive. Rick held up his hands. I'm just telling you what the owners worry about, he said. This place barely made it through last winter. You want us to close? Then we all lose our jobs. Just keep it covered. Don't talk about it. Don't make it a thing. He glanced at the clock. You got tables. Ayanna walked back out, the bandage suddenly feeling heavier than it had all week. At the pass, Manny slid a plate toward her. They giving you grief, he muttered. Same old, she said, lifting the tray with her left hand and balancing it against her hip. Her right stayed tucked in close, as if she could hide it inside her own ribs. As she headed back toward Ellie's booth, she pasted on the smile she kept for customers, the one that hid the old burns on her hand and the fresh ones on her heart. Nobody needed to see either, at least, that's what she told herself. For the rest of the afternoon, she kept her distance from booth 3. Carla, the other server on shift, picked up part of her section to help. But Ayanna knew it was also because Rick didn't want more questions from the curious kid. Still, every time she passed, she felt Ellie's eyes on her, studying the way she held the coffee pot, the way she used only her left hand to set down plates. Kids didn't miss things the way adults pretended to. On her short break, she slipped outside to the alley behind the diner, leaning against the cool brick. She pulled her phone from her apron pocket with her left hand, scrolling through texts with her thumb. There was one from her little sister, Tiana. Made it to practice safe. Coach says hi. A small smile touched Ayanna's lips. Tiana was 14 now, long-legged and bright, with a laugh that somehow still lit up rooms, even after everything. Keeping her in shoes, books, and bus money was one of the reasons Ayanna worked doubles with a half-healed hand. Her thumb hovered over her lock screen picture for a moment. It was old, but she kept it, herself at 19. Holding a neighbor's baby on the front steps of their old building, both of them grinning at something off camera. Her right hand in the photo was smooth and strong, fingers splayed like she owned the whole world. That building was gone now, burned black in some spots, painted over in others. That baby had been pulled out alive. One old man on the top floor had not. The fire report had called it faulty wiring. The neighbors had called it landlord didn't care. Her nightmares just called it fire. Break's over. Rick's voice called from the back door, dragging her back. Got a new table in your section. She slid the phone away, exhaled, and plastered on her work smile. Inside, the diner buzzed with the soft chaos of a slow shift, someone's phone ringing with a loud song, spoons clinking in coffee cups, the TV over the counter showing the news on mute. Ellie and her mom were gone, a few crumbs, and a bright crayon drawing left on the table. As Ayana wiped it down, the drawing caught her eye. It was a stick figure picture in bright colors. A tall woman with brown skin and curly hair, one hand colored solid orange and red like fire. Next to her stood a small girl with yellow hair, both of them smiling. Above them, in big wobbly letters, were the words, "My hero." Ayana's breath hitched. On the back, in a careful adult hand, a note. "Thank you for being so kind to my daughter, Grace and Ellie." A phone number followed. Her fingers shook as she tucked the paper gently into her apron. She didn't know why she kept it. Maybe because it was the first time anyone had drawn her scars as something powerful instead of ugly. She went back to work, moving through the afternoon like a ghost with a tray. She had no idea that a crayon picture and a child's question had just cracked open a door she'd worked hard to keep shut. 3 days later, on a rainy Saturday, the diner was packed. Wet umbrellas dripped by the door, every booth was full, and the bell over the entrance jingled so often it sounded like a nervous twitch. Ayana moved between tables, like a dancer who'd forgotten she was tired. The tray balanced on her left arm, her right hand tucked close. Her bandage was covered today by a black fingerless glove, like Rick had asked, but she still felt naked. Every time someone's eyes dropped to that hand, she wanted to shove it into her pocket. Around lunchtime, the bell rang again, and a familiar little voice floated over the noise. "There she is, Mommy." "That's her." Ayana turned. Ellie stood by the hostess stand, ponytail damp, clutching a stuffed unicorn. "Grace." Her mom smiled and waved. They waited to be seated, but Ellie broke free the second she saw Ayana and ran over, sneakers squeaking on the tile. "Hi," she said, beaming. "We came back to see you." Ayana laughed in spite of herself, catching a falling menu with her good hand. "Well, hey, Miss Ellie," she said. "You hungry again already? That grilled cheese didn't hold you." Grace hurried over, cheeks a little pink. "Hope it's okay," she said. "She's been talking about you all week. I figured another milkshake wouldn't hurt." Her eyes landed on the glove, then flicked up. A question there, but she didn't ask. "It's fine," Ayana said, glancing at the full tables. "We're crazy busy, though. Might be a bit of a wait." "We don't mind," Grace replied. "We'll take whatever table." She hesitated, then added, "Actually, if you have time later, I have something I'd like to ask you about, if that's not weird." Weirder than bandage talks and bad dreams, Ayana thought, but she just nodded. "Sure, let me get you two settled." They ended up at the same corner booth. As Ayana slid Ellie's kids menu toward her, the girl tugged at her glove. "Do you still have your hero hand?" she asked in a whisper that carried anyway. "The one that got saved?" "Ellie," Grace warned, but Ayana held up her left hand in a small stop sign. "It's okay," she said. For a moment, she looked at the glove covering her right. The urge to keep it hidden fought with something else, a tiredness that wasn't just from long shifts. Slowly, before she could change her mind, she peeled the glove off. The air felt cool on the bandage. She unwound the wrap halfway, enough to show the back of her hand. The shiny, twisted skin caught the light, a pattern of pale and dark lines climbing from her knuckles to her wrist, like branches of a strange tree. A couple at the next table glanced over, then looked away fast. Ellie, though, leaned in close, eyes wide. "Wow," she breathed. "It looks like when paper gets all wrinkly in the fire, but doesn't burn up all the way." Ayana huffed out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Yeah," she said. "Something like that?" Grace's face had gone pale. Her eyes were locked on the scars, but not with disgust, with shock. "You said you were in a fire," she murmured, half to Ellie, half to herself. "The one in our old building, right before we moved. The one on West 12th. She looked up at Ayana. "That's where you grew up, isn't it? You told another server once you were from over there." Ayana's heart thudded against her ribs. "Yeah," she said slowly. "Top floor, 4C." Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes so fast they spilled over. "We were in 3B, she whispered. "Ellie and me? The night of the fire." She turned to her daughter, then back to Ayanna. "My God," she said, voice shaking. "I think you're the one who saved my little girl." The diner sounds faded into a dull buzz. Ayanna's mind whirled back to that night a year ago, the smell of smoke in the hallway, the shriek of alarms that came too late. She'd just gotten off a late shift at the old job, keys still in her pocket, when she'd turned the corner and seen her building breathing fire out of the windows. People had been on the sidewalk in bare feet, coughing, crying. A woman had screamed that her baby was still inside. Her own feet had moved before her brain, up the hot staircase, into thick smoke that burned her lungs. "I went in on instinct," she said now, her voice far away in her own ears. "I knew the place. Knew which doors stuck, which windows were painted shut. On the 3rd floor, I heard a kid crying and 3B door was jammed." Her hand twitched, remembering. "I busted it with my shoulder." Fire was in the kitchen. Smoke everywhere. There was a little girl on the floor, under the table, holding a stuffed unicorn so tight it looked like she was choking it. She gave a shaky smile at Ellie's wide-eyed stare. "You haven't let that thing go, I see." Ellie's jaw dropped. She clutched the unicorn to her chest. "Mommy, she talks like the lady in my dream," she whispered. "The one who picked me up and said, 'I got you, baby.'" Grace covered her mouth with both hands now, shoulders shaking. "I was outside," she choked. "They told us not to go back up. I was screaming that my baby was on the 3rd floor. They held me back. The firefighters weren't up there yet. Then somebody shouted that a girl from upstairs had gone in." She looked at Ayanna, really looked, seeing past the apron and the tired eyes to the young woman who had run toward fire instead of away. "You carried Ellie out," she said. "You were coughing so hard, you could barely breathe. Your hand was already burned, but you didn't let her go." Ayanna saw it again, the weight of the small body in her arms, the heat-licking bruised skin, the window at the end of the hall glowing orange. She'd wrapped her right hand in a wet towel to grab the burning doorknob, but flames had still kissed it, clinging hungry. When she'd stumbled down the stairs and out into cold air, someone had grabbed the child from her arms, but no one had grabbed her. Sirens, shouts, a mask over her face, a firefighter yelling at her for going in alone, an old man's empty window. She'd woken in the hospital with a bandaged hand and a guilt so heavy it felt like a second skin. She'd slipped out as soon as they let her, before reporters could show up with cameras. Heroes got parades. She'd felt like a thief, walking away with scars and someone else's life on her conscience. "I didn't know who you were," she said, throat tight. "They said the mom and kid made it out. That's all. I never saw you again. I thought maybe," she swallowed. "I thought maybe you didn't want to see me." Grace reached across the table, grabbing Ayanna's left hand in both of hers. "Didn't want to see you," she said, tears running down her cheeks now. "I have been praying for you every night. I didn't know your name. I just called you the girl from upstairs. I pictured you as an angel, or a firefighter, or, I don't know, not a person I might be rude to about hot coffee in a diner." She laughed through the tears. "I never dreamed you'd be refilling my cup." Ellie tugged on Ayanna's apron, her small face serious. "So who saved you?" she asked again, softer this time. "If you saved me from the fire, who saved you?" Ayanna looked down at her bandaged hand, at Grace's tight grip on her other. For a long second, she didn't know how to answer. Then, slowly, she said, "A firefighter pulled me out when I went back for Mr. Alvarez. I didn't make it to him. Smoke got me first." Her eyes stung. "So I guess he saved me? But so did y'all, knowing you were alive." She blew out a breath. "Some nights that's the only thing that keeps me from thinking I should have stayed in there." Ellie frowned, confused. Why would you want to stay in the fire? She asked. Fires are scary. They are, Ayana said softly. But sometimes, after, the feelings in your head get all mixed up. You start thinking maybe you should have done more. Guilt is like smoke. It gets in everywhere. Grace squeezed her hand. You did more than anyone, she said firmly. You owe that fire nothing. She glanced toward the counter, where Rick stood, eyes wide, pretending not to listen. And this place owes you a lot more than small talk and bad hours. The shock of the moment didn't stay contained in the corner booth. News travels fast in a small diner. Manny leaned over the pass, eyes wide, as Carla whispered the story between orders. Regulars who'd been sitting at the counter for years, trading jokes and weather complaints, turned in their stools to stare at Ayana like they were seeing her for the first time. The old man who always ordered black coffee every morning thumped his fist softly on the table. Knew that girl had steel in her, he muttered. Rick, who had been wiping the same clean spot on the counter for 5 minutes, finally stepped away and approached the booth. His polite manager smiled back on. Everything okay over here? He asked, though he'd heard enough to know the answer was more than fine. His eyes darted to Grace's wet face, to Ellie's tight grip on Ayana's apron, to the half-unwrapped scars on Ayana's hand. Grace turned to him, her expression shifting from soft gratitude to something sharper. Did you know she ran into a burning building to save my child? She asked, voice steady now in that dangerous way. That she burned her hand doing it. Rick blinked. I had heard she was in a fire, he stammered. But I didn't. The details. You told her to hide it. Grace cut in. You told her not to make it a thing, right? I heard you from the hallway the other day. Her jaw set. My daughter asks about her bandage. Because she recognizes it. Because this woman is the reason she can sit here and drink a milkshake, instead of having her picture on a wall somewhere with candles under it. The diner went so quiet, Ayana could hear the tick of the cheap clock over the kitchen door. Rick flushed red, eyes flicking around at the watching faces. We just didn't want to make customers uncomfortable, he muttered. You know what's uncomfortable, Grace shot back. Not being able to sleep, because you don't know if the person who saved your baby is alive. Watching your kid panic every time she hears a smoke alarm. That scar doesn't make me uncomfortable. It makes me grateful. She stood up, still holding Ayana's hand. If anybody in this place has a problem seeing what real courage looks like, that's their problem, not hers. Ellie scrambled out of the booth and planted herself between Ayana and Rick, small arms spread like a shield. She's my hero, she announced, chin up. You can't hide heroes. A couple people at the counter clapped softly. Manny let out a low amen from the pass. Rick opened his mouth, then closed it, then finally said, of course, we appreciate Ayana here. She's a valued employee. It sounded weak even to his own ears. Grace wasn't done. Do you have any idea how many lives she touched that night? She asked, her voice carrying now. Do you know that building had 4 code violations? That the landlord got a fine and moved on, while people like her and Mr. Alvarez paid with their bodies. She looked around at the painted walls, the fake neon beer signs. You got a woman here carrying scars for other people, and you're worried about bad reviews. Heat crawled up Ayana's neck. She wasn't used to people fighting for her like this. Her instinct was to shrink, to make herself small, to ease the tension. But something about Ellie's little back pressed against her apron, protecting her for once, and Grace's fire, and the looks on the regulars' faces, that mix of shame, pride, and dawning respect made her stay put. I don't want special treatment, she said quietly. I just don't want to be treated like something ugly to hide. She looked at Rick, not angry now, just tired. I show up on time. I work hard. I saved a kid once. I got hurt doing it. All I'm asking is to be allowed to carry that without having to pretend it never happened. Rick swallowed hard. For the first time since she'd worked there, he really met her eyes. "You're right," he said, surprising even himself. "I was wrong." He glanced around at the room, at his own reflection in the front window, small, stiff, holding a towel like a shield. This place is supposed to be about community, not about pretending. If you want to cover your hand, that's your choice. If you don't, that's your choice too. I won't say another word about it. Grace nodded once. "Good start," she said. "Now, how about you let her sit down for 5 minutes and drink a glass of water like she's a human being, not just a tray with legs." From that day on, Ayanna stopped pretending her scars didn't exist. She didn't walk around waving her hand in people's faces, but she stopped hiding it like a dirty secret. Some days she wore the glove for comfort, to keep the skin from drying and cracking. Other days, especially when her hand ached with the change in weather, she let the bandage show. When kids asked, she told simple stories about fire and bravery, and being careful with candles. When grown-ups stared, and then stammered, "What happened?" she answered, or didn't. Depending on how their eyes looked, word spread in the neighborhood faster than the steam from Manny's grill. "You hear about that waitress at Lakeside?" people said. "The one who ran into the fire on West 12th. Some folks came in just to see if the stories were true, peeking over menus until they spotted her, then whispering to each other. At first, Ayanna hated it. She felt like a zoo exhibit. But then, slowly, the looks began to change. Less pity, more respect. One teen girl with braids down her back came up after her shift one evening and said, "I was in that building too. Thank you." An old woman pressed a wrinkled 20 into her palm and said, "For your sister's school shoes, baby. You earned it a long time ago." Grace and Ellie became regulars, always asking for Ayanna's section. Ellie drew new pictures every time. Ayanna with a cape, Ayanna with a firefighter's helmet, Ayanna standing on a cloud high above orange scribbles. One afternoon, Ellie brought a school paper, a big A+ in red at the top. "We had to write about a hero," she announced, sliding it across the table. "I wrote about you." Ayanna read the shaky letters, her vision blurring. "My hero is Ayanna," it began. "She saved me from a fire, and she is nice and brings pancakes. She has a special hand that looks like fire, but is soft." She laughed through fresh tears. "Girl, you're gonna make me mess up my mascara," she said, wiping under her eyes with the back of her smooth left hand. Later that week, Grace pulled her aside by the coffee station. "Ellie's school is doing a Community Heroes Day next month," she said. "Police, firefighters, nurses, kid stuff." She told her teacher she wants you there. The teacher said yes, if you're willing. Ayanna's first instinct was to say no. Who was she to stand up next to people in uniforms and talk about bravery? She was just a waitress with a burned hand and a rent bill. But then she thought of Ellie's question, "Who saved you?" and how hard it had been to answer it honestly. Maybe telling the whole story out loud, not just the neat pieces, was a way to keep saving herself. "I'm not good at speeches," she warned. Grace smiled. "You talk to 20 tables a day," she said. "You'll be fine." She squeezed Ayanna's arm. "They need to see heroes who look like the people who serve them pancakes, not just the ones who show up in movies." On the day of the school assembly, Ayanna stood in the gym of Jefferson Elementary, her bandaged hand bare and visible, sweat gathering at the back of her neck. Rows of kids sat cross-legged on the floor, buzzing like a swarm of bees. A few parents lined the back wall. On stage there was a police officer in a pressed uniform, a nurse in scrubs, a firefighter in yellow gear. Ayanna felt out of place. In her simple blouse and jeans, name tag still clipped on from the diner because she'd forgotten to take it off. When it was her turn, the principal handed her the mic and nodded. "This is Miss Ayanna," she said. "Some of you may know her from Lakeside Diner. She has something important to share." Ayanna cleared her throat. Her heart seemed to beat in her palm. For a moment, words tangled in her mouth. Then she saw Ellie in the second row, sitting up tall, stuffed unicorn in her lap, eyes bright and trusting. Behind her, Grace gave a small, encouraging nod. I'm not used to talking into one of these, Ayana began, lifting the mic. Her voice shook, but she pushed through. Most days, I just ask, you want fries with that? Or how was your meal? A few kids giggled. That loosened something. A year ago, I came home to my building, and it was on fire, she said. People were screaming. I was scared, really scared. But I heard a kid crying in an apartment I knew had a little girl in it. My feet moved before I could think. I kicked the door. I crawled on the floor, like they tell you in those posters, and I grabbed her. She held up her right hand, letting the light hit the scars. I burned my hand pretty bad doing it, she said. For a long time, I was mad at this hand. I thought, why did you do that? Why didn't you save the old man upstairs too? Why didn't you move faster? I was ashamed of how it looked. My boss told me to hide it, so I wouldn't upset customers. So I wrapped it and tucked it in my apron and pretended it never happened. Her eyes got wet. But every night, when I tried to sleep, the fire came back in my dreams. The only thing that made it quiet sometimes was knowing that little girl got to grow up. She looked at Ellie, whose face was shiny with tears now. Then one day, Ayana went on, voice soft, that same little girl walked into the diner and asked me, who saved you? And I realized I could only answer that if I stopped hiding what happened, if I said my hurt out loud. She took a shaky breath. A firefighter pulled me out. A neighbor held my oxygen mask. A nurse changed my bandages. A landlord's bad choices made the fire worse. My grandma's prayers kept me going. A kid's drawings reminded me I wasn't a monster. A mama at table 3 told my boss my scars were not something to be ashamed of. A lot of people saved me. And every time I tell this story, I feel a little more saved. The gym was quiet. Even the restless boys in the back had gone still. Finally, a small hand shot up. It was a girl with braids and big glasses. Does it still hurt? She asked, pointing to Ayana's hand. Sometimes, Ayana said honestly, when it's cold, when I carry too many plates, when I think too long about the man I didn't reach. She flexed her fingers gently. But it hurts less when I remember why it's there. It hurts less when I let people see it, and it makes them think twice about fire alarms. Or about the lady who brings their food, or about the things they're hiding that they don't have to hide. When the assembly ended, kids flooded around her, some just wanting to touch her arm, some shyly saying, thank you. One boy pulled up his sleeve to show a long white line from his elbow to his wrist. I fell out a tree, he said. I thought it made me look dumb. Maybe it makes me look brave instead. Maybe it makes you look human, Ayana said, smiling. That night, back at Lakeside, the diner buzzed with its usual soft chaos. But the plaque Rick had nailed up near the register that afternoon made the place feel different. It was small, just a simple frame with a printed line inside, in honor of Ayana Brown, who ran into fire for her neighbors and still shows up on time for the breakfast rush. Underneath, in a child's scrawl, someone had taped one of Ellie's drawings, Ayana and Ellie holding hands, both with big smiles, both with one hand colored in orange and red. Customers stopped to read it, some nodding, some saying, that's you, with open wonder. Ayana felt her cheeks heat every time, but she didn't duck away. Instead, she lifted coffee pots, balanced plates, and let people see the hand that carried them. When one man tried to joke, bet you got some story from a kitchen mishap, huh? An older woman at the counter cut him a look and said, you read the sign, or you blind? Then she winked at Ayanna. After closing, with the chairs flipped onto tables and the hum of the fridge, the only sound, Ayana sat in a booth with Grace and Ellie, sharing a slice of pie. Manny insisted on sending out. Ellie traced the lines on the back of Ayana's hand with one gentle fingertip. It's not scary, she said. It's like a map. Like it shows where you've been. Ayana smiled, throat tight. Yeah, she said. It kinda does. Grace sipped her coffee, watching them. I keep thinking about how I used to rush through places like this, she admitted. Grab my food, tip, go. Never really looked at the people serving me, unless they messed something up. Now I can't stop seeing all the bandages and tired eyes and quiet hurts. It's like somebody turned the light on. Sometimes lights show dust we don't want to see, Ayanna said, but then we can clean it. Grace reached across the table and covered Ayanna's scarred hand with her own. You saved my daughter's life, she said. You saved mine too. I was drowning in guilt and fear, till I saw you standing there still breathing. I don't know if heroes believe they're heroes, but that's what you are to us. Ayanna shook her head, tears shining, but not falling. I'm just a girl who did what her grandma taught her, she said. You don't let kids burn if you can help it. You don't leave old folks alone if you can reach them. You don't hide the parts of you that hurt if they might help somebody else feel less alone. As she walked home under the city lights, the night air cool on her face, her bandaged hand swung at her side, not tucked in a pocket like before. She thought of all the people who walked past her every day with invisible burns inside their chests, behind their smiles, under their long sleeves. She thought of Ellie's brave question, of Grace's sharp defense, of Rick's clumsy apology, of the firefighter's strong grip pulling her out of the smoke. She thought of how many times she'd asked herself why she survived when others didn't, and how, slowly, the answer was changing from I don't know to so I can do something with it. She knew now that being saved wasn't a one-time thing that happened on a stairwell in a burning building. It was a choice she made again and again to tell the truth about her scars and let other people's hands meet hers in the light. And she knew that in a world that teaches us to cover every mark and hide every hurt, the bravest thing any of us can do is show the burns we got from loving and let them remind everyone around us that scars are not shame but proof that love stood in the fire and lived.